Well, hello to all our viewers. This is Chris Voisey, voice coach and facilitator of presentation skills, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Blue Frontier Path Online Academy in this interview this morning, and we are very excited to be speaking to the Vice Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg, Professor Mpedi. So a big welcome to you, Professor, this morning. How are you?
I'm fine, Chris, and thank you very much for having me.
No, it's wonderful. Thank you for giving us the time just to gather some of our thoughts and gather some of your thoughts. You know,
Right.
the Online Academy exists to help busy professionals further their education goals and objectives. Essentially, it's a kind of a mentoring role that
Yes,
is played by the Blue Frontier Path Online
yes.
Academy.
Mm.
And I'd really like to talk about that and get your views on
Yeah,
mentorship and how you see that, what role that plays in education these days. And then we're going to get on to talking about your book, which has a most intriguing title. I
yeah,
love it.
yeah,
From the baobab to the mosquito, and we're looking at
yeah.
rethinking leadership from African saints.
Thank you very much, Chris. Mentorship is extremely important. I can attest to that. There is a saying that it takes one diamond to polish another. You know, those that have done things, in life have that knowledge, first-hand experience, and it's always helpful to share that with the next generation. So for me personally, in my academic journey, even before I went to varsity, I was mentored by others. I've got an interesting story to tell, Chris. Growing
Mm.
up at my village, my father always said he wanted me to be a lawyer, but he sadly passed away when I was 6 years old. Nobody could tell me what it meant to be a lawyer, or what that, being a lawyer was all about. People used to say a lawyer lies and a criminal walks free. It was until when I met a gentleman advocate by the name of Advocate Stevens Ramafuku, who was teaching mathematics and physics at my high school, was my karate instructor after hours. He studied law at night. Who could explain this to me? Advocate Stevens Ramafuku was my mentor. He took me under his wing. He trained me in terms of karate, discipline, shared with me what law was all about. When I started studying law, I started using his books during my first year. And down the line, he was using my books. Fast track to today, our roles have changed. I used to be his mentee. Now I am his mentee, mentor. He's doing his
Mm.
PhD with me. And he
Ah.
said something really that touched me. He said, when I mentored you, I was not doing you a favor. I was doing myself a favor.
Mm.
And this is the value of mentorship. Then at varsity, I met amazing people. So all my journey, all the way, I met people who took an interest in me, guided me, and that made me who I am. I believe strongly in mentorship. Even now, I've got few people that I'm mentoring.
Mm. That's absolutely fantastic. I love that story. It's
Yeah,
really
yeah,
brilliant. And I think, as your mentor obviously was
yeah,
very open
yes,
as a human being, because
yeah,
otherwise the unfortunate thing is that one might take the opinion that the mentor knows everything, the mentee
yeah,
knows nothing, and
yeah,
which of course is the mistake we've made in education over the
yeah,
years,
yeah,
assuming that children know nothing and we
yeah,
just chop off the top of their head and pour the
yeah,
information in.
yeah,
Whereas
yeah,
in fact, it is a two-way process, a two-way
yeah,
relationship.
yeah.
That is
No, no,
that is a really
yeah, you're right, Chris. I mean, I'm not that old, but some of the things that involve technology really give me a tough time. And that is where my mentees come in, something that you take me the whole day trying to figure it out. They do it just like that. So it's
yeah,
also a two-way traffic, A
yeah,
mentee definitely will learn from a mentor. A mentor can also learn from a mentee.
yeah. That's a fantastic example. That is certainly what is being aimed at with the Blue Frontier Path
Yeah.
Online Academy, where we're trying to help people. We're trying to take people's hand and help
Yes.
them, because I think I don't know what you think about this. as the vice chancellor of a big university, professor. But sometimes when one is doing a PhD or a thesis or a dissertation for an MBA, whatever it might be, there is a supervisor allocated. But very often one hears about the fact that the supervisor is very busy and has other things on their plate. And sometimes the job of supervising is not happening as well as it could. I mean, is that a fair comment, or is that really not true?
Look, it does happen, I don't want to generalize. There are instances where you find that the supervisor is extremely busy. Actually, a student must understand that the supervisor has got other responsibilities. Of course, you get extreme cases where the supervisor is missing in action. That is also not right. So it's a balancing act. I like what my colleague, we are co-supervising a PhD student with a colleague who has retired but still active in the supervision. When we were speaking to our student, he said, look, we are, this is like flying an aeroplane. We are the instruments that you use to fly this aeroplane. So bring your part, because you also get students that expect the supervisor to do everything for them. So it's a balancing act. One thing that I've discovered in my career is that, when you supervise a student, you learn a lot, yes, in the process. Sometimes it's a topic that you haven't worked on, but because you have experience broadly, you are able to guide the student. The student becomes an expert in the process, especially at the PhD level. So it's also a learning experience. Of course, it's gently guiding and ensuring that, the project is on track, opening doors for the student, because it's also about exposure and so on. So I would say it's a balancing act. One thing for sure, many supervisors are busy. I mean, I'll tell you, I read the manuscript, or the thesis drafts, when I'm flying at airports and so on. So it's that balancing act. When a supervisor says, look, I have this window where I will be able to work on this, I urge my students to respect that, because as a vice chancellor, there are certain times that it gets so busy that I will not be able to do that. So it's a give and take, and working together, taking the project seriously.
Yeah, fantastic. Because I think so often, of course, the people who are studying at that level themselves are so busy. Very often, as you say, it's a balancing act, and very often they are balancing family demands, career demands, because they're in a job where they're expecting, and at the same time they're trying to further their education. That's a lot to take on.
It is. I mean, I remember in my case, I worked as a researcher during the day, which meant I had to research and read things that were unrelated to my master's and my PhD. And at night, I worked on my master's thesis, and also on my PhD thesis later on. So it's about the support structure that one has. I was fortunate at that stage, I didn't have children. And my wife was quite supportive, Those cups of coffee she would make for me sometimes at night, they helped me. So it's also about the support structure that you have as a student, and also ensuring that, you discard what could be, or put in abeyance what you can. If you enjoy going to party, maybe say for the next 3 years, this is my focus, So it's a balancing act again, If you have family, make time for the family. Be clear that on this, maybe Saturdays I'm going to use for this. Sundays, I'm all yours, because you don't want to be a doctor and then at the end be a single doctor being divorced, for your. So it's balancing. Yeah. It's about balancing conflicting and competing issues.
Exactly. And I think if you are a party person, at the end of the whole thing, you hold a big party for that support group.
Exactly, of course.
Especially your wife or your husband who has looked after you. Because it's really a very big thing. And one just, the fantastic thing is the sense of achievement and having got there. When you finally get there, you've got that very important degree, those letters behind your name. And you've been helped to get there. I mean, that sort of support is a very African concept, you know,
It is. It is.
supporting someone to
Yeah.
get to where they need to get.
Yeah. I would say, Chris, it takes a village to get a PhD, you know.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
Also,
So,
colleagues at work. I found my colleagues so supportive. It really made a huge difference. You know, one of the professors used to say to me, hey, I've been there. I know how it is, but it will pass. You will be fine. Keep on pushing. Because you always have this guilt. Ne? You sit there maybe watching a cricket game or a soccer match. You're like, hey, I should be working, you know. It's just balancing your time. Push, take time to rest, and then continue.
Yeah, fantastic advice. So on that note, I'd like to move on to your book, Professor, with this very intriguing and very African-sounding title, From the Baobab to the Mosquito. I'm fascinated. So your sort of subtitle is Rethinking Leadership through African Sayings. This is very interesting because leadership is so much under the spotlight today. I mean, if we look all over the world, we see very many examples of the failure of leadership as we understand it.
Yeah. Look, what inspired me to write this book is there's a perception that there's nothing to learn from an African point of view. You know, often when you study leadership, you go to business schools, they will tell you about, you know, leadership approaches, you know, they would use examples of Jack Welch. They will refer to, you know, from the Far East, Alibaba, Jack Ma, and all those. Very little or nothing is said about the African way approaches of leadership. And I'm saying it's time to go back to basics. There are lots of lessons to be learned from these African sayings. I say from the baobab to the mosquito, because the baobab tree is one of my favorite trees. And there is one of my favorite sayings, African sayings, which goes as follows. Wisdom is like a baobab tree. You cannot embrace it alone. And the other one, mosquito, which is this one of my favorite sayings, which refers to a mosquito. It says, Chris, if you think you are too small to make a difference, you haven't spent a night with a mosquito. I mean, I come from a village, Chris. One mosquito can terrorize you. So I use these sayings to and flip them and use them to rethink leadership. You know, this book has got 32 chapters. It covers topics such as corruption, teamwork, wisdom, mentorship. You won't believe there's a chapter on mentorship because I believe strongly in mentorship. I wouldn't be where I am if I didn't meet amazing men and women. Even today, I've got mentors that I can pick up a phone and call them and say, look, how would you deal with this kind of a situation? As people and as leaders, you cannot achieve anything on your own. If there's somebody who says, I made it on my own, is a problem. Because you will never stop learning, and you can learn from mistakes of others, but also on those that have succeeded. You know, you need someone to support you. And especially those that have done these things, you know, people who are older than us, who have been there. There's this tendency to think anything old is bad, you know. We're the new generation, we do it the new style, you know, we freestyle it. That is where things go wrong. So that is what inspired me to put this book together. And it has been well received, and I'm grateful for that.
That's marvelous. It seems to me, so you say it came out at the end of last year, Professor?
Yeah. It came out at the end of last year and is available at reputable bookshops. You know, we appreciate whatever support, because the royalties from the book go to a bursary fund for academically deserving students at UJ. It's another form of mentorship, opening doors.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really marvelous. You know, maybe the timing is really good, because if we look at the kind of, you know, to have a more Afrocentric or an African view of leadership, I think is actually quite crucial, because we're at a point in history where the Western view of things, which has been dominant for so long, and you know, you talk about the self-made man, which is a very Western concept. And we all look up and we worship the self-made man. The self-made man doesn't exist. The self-made woman doesn't exist, because we're not taking into account all those factors that have fed into the making of that human being.
True. I mean, I like this saying, standing on the shoulders of the giants, you know. And it's also about, you know, it's a two-way traffic. You know, somebody said something interesting that I don't know whether it's a saying or whatever people see. It was a meme I saw, and somebody talked about it, that a tortoise always have a perspective of a tortoise. You know, you find a tortoise trying to tell a giraffe about what the horizon looks like, you know. And you look at it, it sounds like it's a mismatch. Then I flip it around, I say, but what about a situation where the giraffe lifts the tortoise so that they both can have that beautiful view and perspective? And that way, you know, a self-made man will always have that individualistic high-level view or a low-level view, but will never benefit from the other side, that we rise together, we rise by lifting each other, you know. And the selfish, they don't last in business or anywhere, you know. Honestly, at some point, they run out of steam. But if you move with your team, you move with your community, you move with your family, you have that stamina. Like this African saying that if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go with others.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, in fact, it ties more into the idea of collaborative leadership, you know, where we are collaborating with each other to solve whatever the problems might be, to find the solutions.
Right.
And one gets then, as you say, you mentioned wisdom, you mentioned teamwork, and these are things that feed into a more effective solution for more people.
Right. That's right.
Yeah, which I think leaders today are more and more needing to look at. That sounds absolutely wonderful, Professor. I don't want to take too much of your time. And I thank you very much for your comments there, because it's very important for us, particularly from your perspective as a top academic there, to see, you know, how do we approach, even academia has always had this rather esoteric, rather unachievable thing to it, you know, and yet just to take on these sorts of concepts and wrestle with them is so important for everybody, for everyday people.
That's right. I'm glad you touched on academia. You know, I meet several academics, and I can tell you this one didn't have a mentor, because they think they know, they mess things up. And those that have been mentored, you see, they thrive, and they have this long and successful careers. It's a call, you know, this requires us to ensure that mentorship is a common thing at various institutions of higher learning, and also to pay more attention on the marginalized and the underrepresented groups like women, to open doors for them, to show them the way. I really swear by mentorship. My mentors, you know, one from my PhD supervisor took me overseas, explained to me, you know, he always said, young man, when you are visiting a research institution overseas, you make an appointment with the PA of the director, and then you thank the person for welcoming you. These basic things, you know, humility and so on. The current generation, not all, but many, the people are entitled, you know, they don't know thank you, no please, and these are the words that would you know, open doors for people. And as you know, in life, one thing leads to another.
Yeah, and the more we realize how dependent we are on that, really the less entitled we should be, because then the more we realize that the success of each one of us is dependent on many factors.
Yeah.
and certainly dependent on the people around us.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Professor Mpedi, this has been wonderful. I've so
Yeah.
enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah.
I
Same here.
want to get hold of your book because I really
Yeah.
would like to read that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm fascinated by this subject of leadership, and it
Yeah.
sounds like a most interesting slant.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for being with us.
Yeah.
And to all our viewers, thank you very much for being on this call and for
Yeah.
listening to Professor Mpedi of the University of Johannesburg.
Yeah.
And we wish you all the best, Professor, as you
Yeah.
go forward. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Thank you very much, Chris, for having me.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.